A very good morning to all of you. The topic for today's webinar is on polycystic ovarian syndrome. Right? So it's a very common disorder which is seen in adolescents these days and even in the reproductive age group uh, in today's world. So it has become a very common problem, and I think even the general public is quite aware about the few aspects of it, if not in detail. So let's see what is polycystic ovarian syndrome. To begin with, I would like to say that we all, as human beings, are just gene machines. So, most of our disorders are these days found to be linked with our genetic makeup. Right? So, polycystic ovarian syndrome was first described by Steen Leventhal as a triad of amenorrhea and the most common amenorrhea, obesity, and hirsutism way back in 1935. The most common endocrine disorder in women of reproductive age group with a reported incidence of almost 2 to 8%. Now, as you can see, what exactly happens in polycystic ovaries? So, normally the ovary appears like this. It's a small ovary having multiple serrations and grooves on it. And in polycystic ovaries, the ovaries become enlarged and they have this. From outside, they look pearly white in appearance, and inside, if you take a cut section, you will find many small follicles arranged peripherally to the ovary, and the ovarian volume is also increased. Now, it has evolved from a gynecological curiosity to a multi-system endocrinopathy. They have found that the disorder is initially thought to be just a gynecological disorder, but they have found that all these women are later on in life prone for many serious endocrine or even metabolic disorders. Right. So most common but most poorly understood condition with complex pathophysiology with considerable scientific debate. So though the etiopathogenesis is not understood well, the good thing is that the treatment is quite successful in most of the patients, and it is most of the time going to be related to lifestyle modifications. Now, the objectives of today's talk are we all should know how it is categorized or defined or how a patient is called PCOS, the diagnostic criteria which are used, the differential diagnosis of the condition, and the management. Now, the Rotterdam criteria, which were given by ESHRE and ASRM, the international bodies of human reproduction, are oligo-ovulation or anovulation, clinical or laboratory evidence of hyperandrogenism, and polycystic ovaries, which are seen by ultrasound. Now, in addition, the definition also requires exclusion of other medical conditions that cause irregular menses and androgen excess. Now, this is how the ultrasound categorizes an ovary into a polycystic ovary. There is increased ovarian area. There are more than 10 to 15 microcysts organized in the peripheral rosary pattern. Increased echogenicity inside the ovarian stroma. Right? Can you see the echogenicity has increased over here than this? Now, increased ovarian stroma is the single most valuable diagnostic factor for PCOS. Absence of it does not exclude diagnosis. Most of the time, you will find that many girls come to us with the report of polycystic ovaries. But just having polycystic ovaries could be is not diagnostic of polycystic ovarian syndrome. So polycystic ovaries could be there because of other causes of anovulation also. So transvaginal ultrasound is a gold standard for diagnosis of polycystic ovaries. As we saw that the ovarian volume is more than 10 cubic centimeter. It could be bilateral or unilateral, and there are at least 12 peripherally arranged small follicles which are seen in the ovary. So ultrasound scan of ovaries, when do you recommend? You are supposed to do it on within first 5 days of menses, or you give her a withdrawal bleeding and then with a progesterone and then let her have withdrawal bleeding. Rule out pregnancy if she is in the reproductive age group, and then you are going to give her progesterone and let the withdrawal bleed come, or if she is menstruating, then within day 3 or 5 of the menstrual cycle, so that the hormones are at their lowest level. Whenever possible, use transvaginal ultrasound. The follicle number estimated in longitudinal and cross-sectional views both should be taken in ultrasound. Right? Remember, all women with polycystic ovaries need not be PCOS. Now, we should remember that 20 to 30% of women in general population have polycystic ovaries. 17 to 23% of population can have polycystic ovaries. 76 to 80% of these women will have clinical manifestation. Now, concept of spectrum, there is something like PCO, polycystic ovaries, and with increasing BMI, with increasing weight, they are eventually going to become polycystic ovarian syndrome. So it has multiple defects, multiple problems in the body which are seen with polycystic ovaries. Now, what do you mean by a polycystic ovary and what do you mean by a multifollicular ovary? In polycystic ovaries, the follicles are small, the stroma inside is very dense, increased ovarian volume is there, and there is no dominant follicle. In multifollicular ovary, the follicles are larger in size, they have lesser stroma density, they have normal volume, and dominant follicle is also seen. Now, follicular problems. The early follicular growth is excessive. Recruitment of dominant follicle does not occur, and excessive anti-Mullerian hormone is involved in follicular arrest. This is one of the etiopathogenesis given for the polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, other imaging techniques which are used are basically MRI. So, when will you require MRI? So, MRI will be required only when you are suspecting hyperandrogenism and the there is a mass in the lower abdomen. Patient has acne, hirsutism. So, in that case, you are going to do MRI of the pelvis to rule out other causes of hyperandrogenism, which I'll be coming to eventually. Right. Now there is aberrant gonadotropin secretions also. So gonadotropins are LH and FSH mainly for our gynec concern. So you will see that in these patients they have a very high altered ratio of FSH and LH. So the LH is more than the FSH. It is secondary to the increased pulse frequency of GnRH, that is gonadotropin releasing hormone, which selectively increases LH release. The resultant elevation of absolute level of LH is seen. Contrary to this, we see that the FSH levels chronically remain in the lower range throughout the cycle, which is the insufficient level for the follicular growth, and then there is no ovulation also. Adrenal androgen production is also a little bit increased in these PCOS women. There may be common defect in ovarian and adrenal biosynthesis. The pathogenesis of metabolic syndrome in PCOS. The most common pathogenesis is through insulin resistance and obesity. Now, many PCOS women with both obese and non-obese are insulin resistant, and insulin resistance is believed to play a prominent role in pathophysiology. We all know India is the capital of diabetes, it is said, and insulin resistance is very common in Indian population because of the uh, in our race, right? So the hyperinsulinemia causes hyperandrogenism, and then this is seen in the genetic pathophysiology which is given is increased P450C activity, which converts progesterone to 17-hydroxyprogesterone, then to androstenedione and testosterone. Insulin decreases hepatic synthesis of sex hormone binding globulin, and that leads to availability of free androgens. Now, insulin resistance is because post-binding defect in signaling, insulin receptor alteration, or pancreatic beta cell dysfunction. Right? Now, the overall, if you see, these are the salient features of hormones which happens during PCOD. There is increase in the luteinizing hormone. There is increase in the extra ovarian androgen synthesis. There is this leads to hyperandrogenemia. There is increased insulin-like growth factors. Ovarian steroidogenesis is blocked. There is follicular atresia leading to anovulation and infertility. And this androgen excess is going to cause acne, hirsutism, alopecia, or temporal alopecia. There is loss of hair in this area, like male pattern. Now, how it is linked genetically? So the evidence says that there is familial clustering of PCOS involved. Then there is PCOS is genetically determined ovarian disorder. These all were described in the literature. Right. Now, this is supposed to be an autosomal dominant disease and or an X-linked inherited disease. And dysregulation of, as we saw earlier, P450C17 gene controlling the steroidogenesis is suspected to be involved. And insulin receptor gene defect could be there, or polystatin gene defect could be there. Right? So these are new neo hormones in PCOS, that is adiponectin produced in adipose tissue, has an anti-atherogenic effect, lower levels in PCOS, and resistin, which antagonizes insulin action, is higher in PCOS women. So these are the areas which have been studied very well, and all these things tell us that PCOS is going to, patients are more risky to develop metabolic syndrome later on in life, that is diabetes, hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, increased risk of cardiovascular diseases. Now, early signs are in adolescence, emerging as a common cause of menstrual disturbance in adolescent population. If we see the social life of women over the period of last 50 or say 100 years or so, socially women they were deprived, even nutritionally. If you go back 50 years back, women were not obese, that obese. They were working more, they were eating, they were given nutrition less in most of the general rural population. So what used to happen? Their body mass index used to be controlled. Now what we see is women are getting little overweight. Their work pattern has changed. They are working more into um, cerebral, more of less of physical work. So that leads to less of increase in the body mass index, and that itself makes them prone for either insulin resistance, polycystic ovaries, and later on metabolic syndrome. These women, in the later part of their second and third decade, they come to the hospital. If they don't come in the adolescent age group, they will come in the reproductive age group for infertility. So more than 75% of women of PCOS will have infertility because um, the ovulation does not occur. Even if ovulation occurs, implantation is defective. And even if implantation occurs, the sustenance of pregnancy is quite problematic in PCOS women. Now, PCOS and obesity, almost 40 to 50% of women of PCOS are obese. Now, hirsutism. These are all clinical features of PCOS associated with PCOS. There are racial differences exist. It is seen hirsutism is seen more in South Asians and less in Eastern Asians. Right? So in Indian population, you may see that there is hirsutism, like facial. In the next slide, I'll show you. This is how there is increase in the facial hair. Then there is, little bit here on the chin, and then there is acne also. This is all because of hyperandrogenism. In pregnancy, so first of all, the patient may have infertility, and if at all she has conceived with your fertility treatment or even spontaneously for that matter, there is a high chance of spontaneous abortions, impaired glucose tolerance, which will become ultimately gestational diabetes or hypertension in pregnancy, or even growth retarded babies. So PCOS is associated with something we are worried about is metabolic syndrome. So this is a long-term effect of PCOS in these women. So they are going to have eventually in their 40s and 50s insulin resistance, dyslipidemia, hypertension. So these features are linked with increased risk of type 2 diabetes and possibility of premature cardiovascular disease. So, because now they are going to be obese, they are going to be diabetic and hypertensive, they are a high risk to develop even endometrial carcinoma, which is because of the unopposed increased estrogenic activity in the body. And because we saw now that the patient is prone for even the metabolic syndrome, these patients are more risky to develop even the cardiovascular disease. They also are known to have research has shown that they are more risky to have sleep apnea and depression. Now, PCOS women with metabolic syndrome had more hyperandrogenemia than PCOS women without. That means what? A girl comes to you, a woman comes to you with acne, hirsutism, then you should think that this woman could be high risk later on to develop metabolic syndrome. Or a patient who is metabolic syndrome, if you see, they will have maybe some acne or hirsutism. But if a girl comes to you with acne, a lot of acne, and uh, reports showing hyperandrogenism, like hirsutism, even the clinically she has hirsutism or temporal alopecia, then balding, then in that case they are high risk for metabolic syndrome, right? They are risky for Caran syndrome also, which is hyperandrogenism, insulin resistance, and acanthosis nigricans. So these syndrome people will also have uh, PCOS. They have clitoromegaly, temporal balding, deepening of voice. Now, how do you go for differential diagnosis? The differential diagnosis could be, or in fact, at times the picture is like PCOS, but the actual cause is something else. So that could be hyperprolactinemia, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, ovarian and adrenal tumors, Cushing syndrome, or drugs. Now, coming to hyperprolactinemia, we can rule out by doing thyroid and prolactin levels. Then congenital adrenal hyperplasia, you are going to suspect when the patient has other problems associated with hirsutism and this thing. Then in that case, maybe the blood pressure is also high. Then ovarian and adrenal tumors, there will be masses or there will be other associated signs and symptoms. So you are going to take the entire general history, general examinations, and specifically general examination plays a very important role. And later on, when you investigate, most of the things are going to become very clear. It is the ovarian mass or lump in lower abdomen or sonography not showing polycystic ovaries. If the patient comes to you with say hirsutism, acne, deepening of voice, and if there is ovary is replaced by a big mass, then most probably it is going to be an hormone secreting ovarian tumor. So what all tests you are going to do if the patient has only polycystic ovaries, you are going to rule out pregnancy if she is sexually active, married, trying to conceive and having amenorrhea. First thing is rule out pregnancy by doing serum HCG or a simple urine pregnancy test. Then serum prolactin, thyroid level, FSH, LH, serum estradiol and estrone have to be done for hormonal assessment. Then for insulin resistance, you are going to do fasting glucose, 2-hour OGTT, fasting insulin, free, and then the three tests are these three are for hyperandrogenism. That is free testosterone, DHEAS, 17-hydroxyprogesterone, pelvic USG, and lipids. So these are the tests which are going to tell you whether the other causes are responsible for this clinical presentation, which we just saw. Now these are the tests like total or free androgen, free testosterone is very high, then it could be an androgen secreting tumor. DHEAS is high, then it could be an androgen secreting tumor of the adrenal gland. Morning 17 hydroxyprogesterone may increase level may suggest late onset congenital adrenal hyperplasia. 24-hour urine protein cortisol and creatinine will suggest the Cushing syndrome. Prolactin will rule out prolactinemia, hyperprolactinemia, and T3, T4, TSH will rule out thyroid disorders, which are also commonly associated with PCOS. Now, these are the ultrasound features which we had seen before only. There were more than 12 follicles to 9 millimeter in diameter, and the ovarian volume overall increases to more than 10 cubic centimeter. So, if you take a cut section of a polycystic ovary, it will look like this, and this is how a normal ovary looks. On ultrasound, a normal ovary looks like this, and a PCO ovary looks like this. Treatment. Treatment is by lifestyle modification, by diet and exercise, and if required, insulin sensitizers. Right? And then the treatment will depend upon what is the need of that particular patient. There are going to be three categories, four categories of patient. One is going to be a patient who is having menstrual irregularity but no, not much of hirsutism, but yes, acne. There's going to be a patient who is going to have acne and hirsutism, but not much of menstrual irregularity. Or the patient has obesity and menstrual irregularity. Or there is a patient who has everything and on top of that she has infertility. Or the patient is in her 45, 50 years of age and now she has developed endometrial, abnormal uterine bleeding, or just like what we used to call metropathia hemorrhagica, or patient has developed uh, metabolic syndrome, or already she is diabetic, hypertensive, obese, and now she has developed even the coronary artery disease symptoms, right? So all these things need to be assessed, and the treatment is targeted according to the age of the patient, the reproductive needs of the patient, and what is the if is she really affected, or is a menstrual cycle affected in the whole process, right? Now the treatment goals are towards the weight reduction. Weight reduction can be achieved by change in the lifestyle, by change in the adopting a correct diet pattern and adopting to activity, physical activity, that is exercise. And then we also have insulin sensitizers, which are going to reduce the insulin, high insulin levels in the body. Right. So the dietary goals, we did not go into details. We all know that only exercise will not help, but only diet helps in reduction of weight. So it is mainly the weight which is controlled is mainly what you eat, right? So what we eat is going to be it has to be a healthy diet. It has to be adjusted according to the body mass index of the what is going to be the ideal weight for that particular height of that patient, right? So people keep asking questions that my friend is 95 kgs, but she doesn't have any menstrual problems. Then why with a little bit of change, with little bit of increase in body mass index, I have developed PCOD. So it's all genetically linked. So those certain patients will be prone to develop insulin resistance, and with little bit change in the modified lifestyle and reduction in weight is going to get down their insulin resistance, and they're going to be benefited. So it's a lifelong process for these patients that they have to maintain their body mass index and keep the insulin resistance in the body at a lower level. So we all know carbohydrates have to be reduced, the protein can be kept at the optimum level, and even the fats have to be reduced. Right? So a dietitian plays a very important role in management of polycystic ovarian patients. Then, as we all know, even if the patient reduces 5% of the weight, then the um, the insulin resistance goes down quite well, right? And even the uh, um, menstrual irregularity comes back to normal, and even the hyperandrogenic status goes down. Those women who do aerobic or exercises which are going to burn more calories, it is found that 40% of them have improved insulin sensitivity even within 48 hours of starting the physical activity. Now, the next option is insulin sensitizers. So, metformin and pioglitazone, we all know these are newer generation drugs, pioglitazone, rosiglitazone, which are useful for reducing they are insulin sensitizers used in management of PCOS, even in all age groups. So how does it help? It decreases the hepatic glucose production. It improves insulin sensitivity. It has anti-lipolytic effect, increases SHBG, reduces leptin production, endometrial action is increased, right? So all these benefits are going to be beneficial for the patient, right? Infertility, we are going to give metformin, try to reduce weight, and if it doesn't help, then we are going to start with clomiphene induction of ovulation for that particular patient, right? Then coming to, can we do something surgically for such patients? So those patients who have PCOD and those who have a dense ovarian stroma, these are the candidates for laparoscopic ovarian drilling, which is done uh, in recent times. Previously, 50 years back, they were doing wedge resection, where they used to just cut the portion of ovary and expect the release of steroidic hormones, and then you expect that the ovary will start functioning well. But the problem was, because you did open surgery, then you cut the surface of ovary, there used to be high chance of adhesions. And in fact, all of them used to have later on adhesions in the pelvis, tubal block, and they used to all get infertile and go for IVF. So now what we do is laparoscopic ovarian drilling. So laparoscopic ovarian drilling also, if it is done over enthusiastically, will lead to same outcomes as wedge resection. So what we do in laparoscopic ovarian drilling, it has to be first of all, selection of patient is very important. Every polycystic ovarian syndrome is not a candidate for laparoscopic ovarian drilling. Once you have selected the case, it has to be a rule of 4. Only 4 to 5 drills are done. 40-watt low current is used. A depth of just 4 millimeter is, follicle is drilled, and the current is passed only for 4 seconds. The whole concept is you release these androgenic hormones and expect that the patient ovary should function normally, right? So this is how in laparoscopy these are the normal ovaries, and you can see how big they become in polycystic ovarian. They become pearly white with smooth surface, and then you have to make 4 punctures like this on a particular ovary. Now, what are the advantages? It has high success rates, prolonged response, multiple births. If you use with clomiphene citrate, it's going to lead to multiple births. And if you use clomiphene in a larger dose, you're going to have OHSS. Now, before coming to the summary, say if a girl comes to us with irregular menses, and then polycystic ovaries, how do you treat her? First of all, lifestyle modification is a must. Even if she's thin PCOS, her nutrition needs to be improved. Body mass index has to be kept optimum. Her endocrine problems, if associated, should be ruled out. Her hirsutism and acne can be dealt with the help of a dermatologist in association with a gynecologist. Then diet is managed with the help of dietitian. So it's a multidisciplinary management. And then she is going to ask you about the management of menstrual cycle. So if she see a prolonged growth of endometrium is not good, unopposed estrogen is not good. So either we can put her on low dose ossipils which are anti-androgenic also. So there are many new ossipils which are available which are going to be less androgenic or anti-androgenic, which will have effect on reducing acne and even the further progress to hirsutism. The hirsutism which is already developed cannot be changed. So what they have to do, they have to go for electrolysis or all those technical procedures which are done by dermatologists. But further prevention can be prevented by giving anti-androgenic oral contraceptive pills. So oral contraceptive pills are going to act on the hypothalamus pituitary ovarian axis and get back the steroidogenesis back to normal, and she's going to have a regular withdrawal rate. But overall, if you ask, it is going to be just the lifestyle modification, which is over a period of time, which is going to improve the outcome of these patients. And they have to be throughout life conscious and aware that they are going to be high risk candidates for later on in life for in pregnancy for diabetes and later on for metabolic syndrome in future life and even for endometrial carcinoma. So maintaining their weight, maintaining their lifestyle, maintaining good nutrition, good exercise pattern daily is very important for all these women who are PCOS and who have been treated also. So they have to maintain it for a long time. So this is how they have trouble in conceiving, they have mood changes, acne, fatigue, insulin resistance, high testosterone, and because they have all of these, they have low esteem, either fertile couples are going to have low sex drive, right? So irregular and missed periods, all these are going to be having the personality, low esteem in the personality also. So overall, this patient needs good counseling and good treatment. And PCOS can be tackled very well with good changes in the lifestyle and lifestyle modification. So I would say at the end that you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. Means what the girl has got the thing from maybe genetically to her that we cannot change. But then now that we have understood that this problem is there or she's prone for this kind of problem, then we have an opportunity to change our body system by changes in the lifestyle and by keeping a track of our that we don't develop later on cardiovascular risk of because of metabolic syndrome. So thank you so much. So it's not a very scary disease, but there should be more programs done in the schools and colleges for more and more awareness about polycystic ovarian syndrome. Thank you so much.